You know, it's a funny thing how a smell can just sneak up on you and take you all the way back. Just this morning, I was pulling a pie out of the oven, good ol' apple with cinnamon, just the way Tommy liked it, and that warm little puff of air, it hit me right in the chest. Took me back so fast I near forgot where I was standin'. Land sakes alive. I reckon I hadn't thought about that evening in years. But there it was, the porch light flickering, his boots muddy from the riverbank, and that little smile he gave me when he thought no one else was watchin'. We were just kids then, really. Barely out of high school. Murfreesboro wasn't much more than a handful of churches, cornfields, and gossip, but Lord, it was home. We used to dance on the courthouse lawn when the fiddlers came through. He had this way of tapping his foot before the music even started, like he already heard it in his bones. I used to think that meant he was made for joy. I really did, but that ain't the story I'm here to tell you. Truth is, there's something that's been sittin' heavy on my heart lately. Maybe it's 'cause the nights are quieter now, or 'cause my hands don't move quite like they used to, or maybe it's just time. You reach a certain age and realize the memories don't go anywhere. They just sit there, like dust on a shelf, waiting to be touched. And this one, well, this one's itchin' to breathe. You see, my Tommy went to Vietnam, 1967. Got that envelope in the mail, white as bone, name typed like a stranger wrote it. I was 5 months pregnant, standin' at the kitchen sink, watching the steam from the kettle curl up like ghosts. He didn't say much, just folded it once, slid it into his Bible, and said, "Guess I'll have to get used to the heat." He always had a way of making hard things sound like jokes. He left in the summer, humid as sin. I remember the sweat tricklin' down his neck, the way his hands didn't quite know what to do with themselves at the bus stop. We kissed once, soft, quick, scared. Then he was gone. 13 months later, he came back. Still had the same boots. Still smelled like Old Spice and tobacco. But his eyes, they were different. Hollow, like he'd seen something no man should ever carry. And though his body came back to Tennessee, his soul, Lord have mercy, I think it stayed in those jungles. We never did talk about what he saw over there. Not really. He'd mumble in his sleep sometimes, words I didn't understand, names I'd never heard. He'd flinch at loud noises, sit in the dark for hours, just staring at the wall. Our little girl would tug at his pant leg, gigglin', beggin' for piggyback rides, and he'd smile, but it was the kind that didn't reach his eyes. Now don't get me wrong, he wasn't cruel. He wasn't mean. He just wasn't all there. Like half his heart had been scooped out and buried overseas. And I suppose I lived with a stranger for 30 years. A man I loved more than air who never truly came home. So why am I telling this now? Well, maybe someone out there needs to know what war does to the ones who survive it, and to the ones who wait. Maybe someone's sitting on a porch like mine, with a swing that creaks and a photo on the mantle, wondering why the man they loved never looked at them the same way again. And maybe, just maybe, it's time I let this story out. Let it stretch its legs. Breathe a little. 'Cause that cinnamon smell, it brought more than just pie memories this morning. It brought him. And Lord help me, I ain't ready to forget just yet. I grew up just outside Murfreesboro, Tennessee, not even 10 miles from where I sit now. Back then, everything felt bigger. The sky was wider, the cornfields taller, and summer seems to stretch on forever. We didn't have much, Lord knows we didn't, but we made do with what we had. Daddy was a carpenter, worked sunup to sundown with hands that could shape wood like it was soft bread dough. Mama kept the house warm with biscuits and hymns, always had an apron on and a song in her throat. Sundays were for church, and Sunday nights were for front porch sittin'. The kind where you'd count lightning bugs and talk about nothin' and everything all at once. There was a rhythm to life, slow and sweet like molasses. Folks waved at each other, knew your dog's name, and always brought casserole when someone passed. That's just how we did it in those days. I was a dreamy little girl, the kind who believed hearts were meant to be soft, not guarded. I'd sit on my windowsill reading borrowed books, wondering what it might feel like to kiss a boy under the stars or walk barefoot through Paris. Course, I'd never been farther than Nashville, but that didn't stop me from dreaming. I used to think the world was full of open doors, just waiting for me to knock. By the time I turned 16, I'd already memorized the names of every boy in church choir, but there was only ever one name that mattered: Tommy McCarthy. He was tall, at least to me, with thick dark hair that curled up at the ends when it got too long, and eyes the color of black coffee. He had this way of leaning against a doorway like he wasn't in a rush for nothing. That kind of calm, it stuck with you. Made you feel safe even when he wasn't saying a word. We met at a picnic by the river. I dropped my lemonade, and he handed me his. Just like that. He didn't make a fuss, didn't say anything clever. Just smiled that soft little smile and said, "No harm done." That was it for me. By 18, I was working as a secretary in the city council building, wearing nylons even in July, answering phones and talking minutes while dreaming about wedding dresses. I still believed, back then, that kindness could fix anything. That love was enough. That people, no matter where they went, would always find their way back home. Tommy and I got married on a Saturday in May of '66. Simple church ceremony. My dress was handmade. Mama stitched every pearl on the collar by hand. He wore his father's suit and scuff shoes, and we said "I do" beneath that same stained glass window we used to stare at in Sunday school. I remember thinking that day, this is it. This is the beginning of everything good. We had a little house with chipped paint and a swing on the porch. I planted marigolds in coffee cans, and he fixed the back steps before winter came. We didn't have a pot to pee in, but Lord, we were happy. Or I thought we were. I'd hum Patsy Cline while making supper and press my ear to his chest when we danced in the kitchen, just to hear that steady beat, that sound of home. I was 19 when I found out I was carrying our first baby. I told him by slipping a pair of tiny socks into his lunch pail. He laughed so hard he cried, pulled me close and said, "Guess we'd better grow up fast." And we did, or tried to. But there was still time to hope, time to believe that the world was gentle and that everything broken could be fixed with enough love and biscuits. But the world had other plans. Sometimes I think about that girl I was, with marigold dirt on her hands and her heart wide open, and I wonder if she'd even recognize the woman I am now. Maybe not, but she'd recognize the porch, and the swing, and the quiet, and maybe that's enough. It was a Tuesday. I remember that clear as the blue above. The kind of day where the sky stretches out without a cloud and the cicadas start singing before lunch. I just finished hanging the bedsheets on the line, and the baby, well, she was still growing inside me, just a flutter then, like butterfly wings. I was humming Crazy by Patsy Cline under my breath, barefoot on the back steps, when I heard the mailbox snap shut. I didn't rush. Mail wasn't ever in a hurry back then, just bills, coupons, church announcements. But that morning, Lord, I wish I hadn't opened that box. There it was. A white envelope, thicker than the rest. No return address. Just Mr. Thomas J. McCarthy typed plain and cold in the center. The paper felt stiff, like it didn't belong with the rest of the day. My fingers started tingling before I even touched it. Isn't that strange? I didn't know what was in it, not really, but some part of me did. Women have a sense for trouble, especially the kind that arrives dressed in silence. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen table next to the sugar jar, and stared at it for a long while. Tommy was still out back choppin' wood, said the porch needed repairin' before the fall rains. I watched him through the window, steady as ever, swingin' the axe like the world made sense. I didn't want to break that. Not yet. He came in sweaty, grinnin', askin' what was for supper. I didn't answer, just slid the envelope across the table and turned my eyes toward the kettle. I couldn't bear to see his face change, but I heard it. That little hitch in his breath. The chair creakin' as he sat down real slow. The sound of the paper tearing. He didn't read it out loud, just sat there, eyes moving back and forth, lips pressed so tight they went pale. When he finished, he folded it once, neat as anything, and placed it back in the envelope. Then he said, "Guess I'll have to get used to the heat." Just like that. No fear in his voice. No trembling hands. Tommy never let the storm show on the outside. I wanted to cry. I really did, but the tears stuck somewhere in my chest, like a peach pit you couldn't cough up. I reached for his hand, and he held mine firm, worn, steady. That was Tommy. Even when the world shifted under him, he stood like an oak. We didn't talk much after that. He went back out and chopped the rest of the wood. I cooked supper like always, fried chicken and cornbread, and we ate it in near silence. Just the clink of forks and the ticking of the kitchen clock. That night, he laid his head in my lap while I stroked his hair and whispered prayers I didn't even know I remembered. He didn't speak, just breathed deep, like he was already leavin' in his sleep. I didn't sleep a wink. I watched the shadows move across the ceiling and felt her kick, our little girl, pushin' against my ribs like she already knew something big was comin'. In the morning, I found the envelope tucked in his Bible, right next to the verse his mama used to love, "Be strong and of a good courage." I stared at those words and felt the first crack in the floor beneath my feet. I didn't know how deep it would go. Not yet. But something inside me shifted that day. It wasn't just fear. It was knowing that the life we were building might not go the way we planned. That this baby girl might meet her daddy through photographs first. That I'd have to be strong, not just for me, but for the both of us. I didn't tell anyone about the letter for a few days. Not even Mama. I wasn't ready to hear the "bless your hearts" or the casseroles on the doorstep. I wasn't ready for the look people give you when they realize you're about to lose something you love. But I knew deep down the clock had started ticking, and the next time I'd watch Tommy walk away, he might not come back. Not the same. The first letter came 2 weeks after he shipped out. Postmarked from somewhere I couldn't pronounce, spelled all strange with slashes and numbers. He wrote about the heat, how it clung to his skin like syrup, how the bugs never stopped their screamin'. Said the food was awful but the coffee strong. He told me he missed the swing on our porch and the sound of the creek behind the house. He said he loved me 3 times, just like always. The second letter was shorter. The third had a smudge of red dust on the corner and smelled faintly of smoke. By month 4, the letters came less often. His handwriting changed, sharper, jittery, like his hand couldn't keep still. The loops of his G and Y got tighter. He stopped signing Tommy and started just putting T. One letter was only 7 words. Still breathing. Miss your biscuits. T. That's when I started praying at night with my hands clenched like fists. Folks in town didn't know what to say. Some did too much, really. The women at church would nod at me all slow, their smiles too soft, like I was already a widow. One Sunday, Sister Maybelle whispered, "You know, Evelyn, war changes a man. Best be ready." I just nodded and looked away, but I wanted to scream. What does that even mean, be ready? At home, I was big as a watermelon and trying to hold it all together. Daddy helped where he could, fix the pipes, mowed the yard, sat real quiet in the evenings with his Bible open, even though I don't think he read a word of it. Mama kept bringing over pie, telling me to sleep while I could. But sleep was a stranger. Every time the phone rang, my stomach flipped. I'd look out the window expecting two men in uniform come in up the walk. But they never came, not then. And then, there was the baby. She came in the middle of a thunderstorm, just like in the movies. Lightning cracked so close it shook the windows. I gave birth on the same bed I slept in as a child. No hospital, just Mama and a neighbor lady named Ruth who smelled like cloves and peppermint. When she cried for the first time, I thought my heart would split wide open. I held her close and whispered, "Your daddy's out there, baby girl, fightin' through rain just like this." I named her Caroline June. Caroline, for strength. June, for me, so she'd never forget where she came from. But the truth is, I was scared. Lord, was I scared. Not just of losing him, but of raising her without him. Of facing this world with only one set of hands. There were days I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the girl staring back. Eyes puffy, hair a mess, shoulders hunched like I was carrying the whole war on my back. I didn't tell anyone about the shame. About how mad I got sometimes. Mad at Tommy for going. Mad at the war. Mad at God. I'd stand in the kitchen at 3 a.m., rockin' Caroline with tears running down my face, whispering apologies she'd never understand. And then there were the protests. Boys burning draft cards on Main Street. Girls shouting through megaphones about blood and oil and lies. I didn't know where I belonged in all that noise. I just knew my husband was out there somewhere, and my daughter was crying for milk, and I hadn't laughed in months. One day, I got a letter from his cousin, Earl, said he saw Tommy in Quantry, but Tommy didn't recognize him at first. Said his eyes were dark, quiet, that he didn't talk unless he had to, that he smoked now a lot. That night I sat on the swing, holding a letter that smelled of jungle and fire, and I felt something crack. Like a porch step under too much weight. I didn't know if he'd come back. And if he did, I didn't know if he'd still be him. So I did what women like me were raised to do. I kept going. Changed diapers. Paid bills. Wrote back every week even when I didn't hear nothing. I told myself, he's still breathing. That's all that matters. But deep down I knew. The man I married had gone to war, and someone else was coming home. The day Tommy came home, the wind stood still. It was late September, and the air had that first snap of autumn in it, the kind that makes you think of school books and Sunday stews. I wore a yellow dress, the one he liked, the one with little blue flowers near the collar. Mama said I looked pretty, but I could barely see straight from the nerves. Caroline was in my arms, wrapped in the quilt my grandma made, soft as clouds and twice as warm. She was 6 months old by then, chubby cheeks, tiny fingers, smelling like baby powder and fresh hope. The bus pulled up to the station slow. You could hear the brakes hiss, like the whole machine was taking a deep breath. There were other families, other women holding signs or clutching rosaries. But I wasn't holding anything but my daughter and the ache in my chest. And then I saw him. Boots hit the pavement first, same pair he wore the day he left. His body came next, tall, leaner than before, broad shoulders weighed down by something I couldn't name. And then, his eyes. Oh Lord, his eyes. They weren't Tommy's. They were darker somehow. Not just in color, but in spirit. Like someone had pulled a shade down over the windows of his soul. He looked at me. I smiled. A full, open, desperate smile. He didn't smile back. Just walked up slow, placed one hand on Caroline's little head, so gently, like he was scared she'd break, and whispered, "Hey, baby girl." His voice cracked, like it hadn't been used in a while. And then he kissed my cheek. Not my lips. My cheek. Like a neighbor would. Or a cousin. I remember the clock in the station lobby said 4:17. I remember the minute hand jerkin', just a little. And I remember thinking, this is it. This is the moment I lose him, not to bullets, not to bombs, but right here at home. We rode back in silence. The radio played Glenn Miller, but he turned it off. At dinner, he barely touched his plate. Caroline cried. He didn't flinch. Just stared at the wall like he was listening to something far away. That night, he laid in bed stiff as a board, hands folded over his chest, eyes open. I whispered, "Are you all right?" He said, "Yeah, just that. No more." Over the next few weeks, the house filled with sound, baby laughter, mama visiting, neighbors dropping off pies, but Tommy stayed quiet. Sat on the porch with his cigarette, staring at nothing. Sometimes he'd walk down to the river and stay gone for hours. Came back muddy, cold, eyes even emptier. One night, I woke up to him shouting. Loud. Words I didn't understand. He was drenched in sweat, fists clenched, back arched like he was fighting something in his sleep. I grabbed his arm, whispering his name. He shoved me off, not hard, just sudden, like he didn't know where he was. Then he curled up and cried. Sobbed really, like a child. I held him till morning. That's when I knew in the marrow of my bones. The man I married died over there. And the man in my bed was someone new. Someone haunted. Someone I loved still with every part of me, but someone I'd never fully reach again. You think the hardest part is when they leave. It ain't. The hardest part is when they come back and you realize you're the only one who remembers who they were. I didn't say any of this to anyone. Not my mama. Not the pastor. Not even myself, not out loud. But that day at the station, when I saw his eyes and they didn't light up, not even for me, that was the day time split in two. Before. And after. And I've been living in the after ever since. After Tommy came back, it wasn't the shouting or the silence that hurt the most. It was the quiet between the two. That strange, heavy stillness that settled over our house like a second roof. The kind of quiet where even the ticking of the clock feels loud, where you start whispering without knowing why, where you stop Logan out loud 'cause no one's Logan back. He'd wake up before dawn and sit in the living room with the TV on mute. Just static sometimes. Or an old western he'd already seen a dozen times. He wouldn't look at me when I came in with the baby. Wouldn't say good morning. Wouldn't touch his coffee unless I left the room. He'd just sit there, his shoulders curved in, his hands restless on his knees, like his body was back in Tennessee, but his mind was still crawling through jungle dirt. We didn't fight. Not really. That would have required more words than we used those days. We just floated past each other. Two ghosts in the same house. I'd lay his plate on the table. He'd eat it without a sound. I'd fold the laundry and place his socks on the bed. He'd wear them like nothing was different, but everything was different. I remember one morning, I dropped a glass in the kitchen. It shattered loud, sharp, unexpected. He flinched so hard he nearly hit the floor. Caroline started crying, and he just stood there, frozen, breathing like he'd run 10 miles. That night, he didn't come to bed. Slept in his chair with the lights off. Just sat in the dark like he was waiting for something bad to find him. And I got quiet too. I stopped writing in my journal. Stopped humming while I did the dishes. Even Patsy Cline on the radio made my chest ache. I used to believe that love was a kind of anchor, something that held you in place when the world tried to drag you under. But now it felt like a weight I had to carry all by myself. Friends stopped calling. Folks from church offered polite smiles, but looked away too quick. I think people were afraid of us, like we were a reminder of things they didn't want to think about. War, sadness, the fact that sometimes people don't come back the same. Sometimes they don't come back at all, even if their boots are still walking and their hearts still beating. I started sleeping in little bursts between feedings and nightmares. I'd watch Caroline sleep, her tiny hand curled around her blanket, and wonder what kind of father she'd know. If she'd remember the way he used to be, or only the man who couldn't look her in the eyes without flinching. One night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea gone cold. The swing creaked beside me his spot, still with that extra pillow I kept out of habit. And for a second, I let myself pretend he'd come out, sit beside me, slip his arm behind my back like he used to, whisper some joke in my ear, kiss my hair, call me Junebug. But the door never opened. The swing stayed empty. And I think maybe that's when I stopped waiting. Stopped waiting for things to go back, for the light to return to his eyes, for the music in our home to start up again. I didn't stop loving him, Lord, no. But I stopped trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. I started surviving instead of hoping. I think I lost a piece of myself in that quiet. The girl who believed in soft endings, in clear answers, in happy ever afters. She's still in there somewhere, buried beneath baby bottles, quiet dinners, and the weight of all the things I never got to say. But the truth is, Evelyn June McCarthy wasn't the same woman once her husband came home. And maybe she never would be again. It was the summer of '87. The heat had settled in early that year, clinging to everything like wet linen. Caroline was away at a church camp in Nashville, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the house was quiet in a different way, not the kind that presses on your chest, but the kind that lets you breathe just a little easier. I was folding towels in the living room while the 6 o'clock news droned on in the background. Tommy was in his usual spot, that faded green armchair near the window, feet up, hands crossed like always. He never really watched the news, not properly, just stared through it, like it was playing in a language he no longer spoke. That night, they aired a segment about a young veteran from some new war. I don't even remember which one. Desert, maybe. The reporter showed a boy, couldn't have been more than 20, sitting in a hospital bed with no legs and eyes so full of fire it near broke your heart. They asked him if he was angry, and he smiled and said, "No, sir. Just grateful I came home at all." I stopped folding, looked over. Tommy was staring at the screen. Not just staring, seeing it. His hands started shaking. He pressed them together tight, like he could keep something inside if he just held on hard enough. And then it happened. He broke. Not loudly, not with a shout or a moan, but with this quiet, awful sound, like a man exhaling after holding his breath for 20 years. His shoulders fell, his face crumpled, and tears, real, steady tears, slid down his cheeks. I didn't move at first, just watched. My heart crawled up into my throat. I'd never seen him cry. Not when his daddy passed. Not when the baby was born. Not even when he came home from hell itself. But here he was, my Tommy, all bone and sorrow and salt water, weeping for a boy on a TV screen. And Lord help me, I loved him more in that moment than I ever had before. I knelt beside the chair and laid my head on his chest. His arms came around me, slow but sure. We stayed like that for a long time, no words, just skin and breath and the space between pain and peace. After that, things didn't change overnight. But something shifted. He started coming to the table earlier. Helped me hang laundry again, poorly. Bless his soul. But he tried. One Sunday, he even came to church. Didn't say nothing, but he sat beside me in that wooden pew like he used to, and I held his hand the whole time. He never spoke much about what broke him that day. I never asked. I didn't need to know the details. Sometimes love ain't about understanding, it's about stayin'. And I stayed. I started working part-time at the library, shelving books and helping kids with their homework. It felt good to be useful, to be seen again not just as Tommy's wife, but as Evelyn. I planted tomatoes in the backyard and wrote letters to old friends. Not everything bloomed, but I did. A little. Caroline came home that summer with a tan and a new laugh I hadn't heard before. She hugged her daddy and said, "You look different." And Key smiled, not wide, but real. A quiet kind of smile, like someone who's remembering what it feels like to be alive. That's when I knew we weren't healed. Maybe we never would be, but we were moving, breathing, trying. And sometimes that's more than enough. I was hanging laundry, just like the day that envelope came all those years ago. Funny how life circles back like that. Same breeze, same birdsong, same smell of sun on cotton. The hospital called around noon. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just sat down on the back steps, apron still on, and let the sky look at me for a while. Lung cancer. That's what they said. From the war, more than likely Agent Orange, the doctors whispered like it was a dirty word. I'd known it was coming. The cough, the tired eyes, the way his hands shook when he tried to butter his toast. But nothing prepares you for the silence a death leaves, not even a quiet man like Tommy. We buried him with military honors. Caroline read a psalm. I placed a sprig of rosemary on the casket for remembrance, and when they handed me the folded flag, I pressed it to my heart and said, "You're finally home now, Tommy." My voice didn't shake. My knees didn't buckle. I just stood there, straight as I could, and let the wind carry the rest. That night, I made tea and sat on the porch swing, the one where we used to sit, side by side, in the early days before the war built a wall between us. I left his pillow where it always was, just out of habit, or maybe out of love. And then, I spoke, out loud, to the air, to God, to him. I said, "I forgive you." Not because he asked. He never could. But because holding on to that ache, that quiet kind of grief, had hollowed me out more than I realized. It wasn't just him who never came all the way home. I'd been living half inside a memory for decades, waiting for someone to reach back through the years and fix it. But nobody can fix what war breaks. So I stopped waiting. I forgave him for the nights he stared through me, for the words he couldn't say, for the years we slept back to back like strangers in a house full of ghosts. I forgave myself, too, for the times I resented him, for the anger I never spoke, for wanting to be held when he couldn't give that anymore. That porch swing creaked like it always did, but that night it didn't sound lonely. I think I let him go. I kept the pillow out for a little while after. Then one morning I took it inside, fluffed it and laid it on the spare bed. Not as a shrine, just as a memory. Something soft, something kind. I watered my tomatoes, called my sister in Georgia, signed up to teach Sunday school again. Life didn't suddenly turn golden. The sky didn't open, but I felt something shift, a loosening, like I could finally exhale after 40 years of holding my breath. I still sit on that swing sometimes. Still make 2 cups of tea out of habit, but I drink both now. One warm, one cool, like past and present sitting side by side, neither one in charge anymore. I don't pretend the pain's gone, but it don't own me now. I chose to live, without expectations, without regret, just forward. And Lord help me, that's enough. You know, when you get to be my age, folks start asking you for advice like you got it all figured out. Truth is, I don't. Not really. I just lived long enough to know that life don't go the way you planned, and love don't always look the way it did in the beginning. Back in my day, I used to think that strength meant keeping it together, smilin' through the hard times, stayin' quiet when your heart was screamin'. But now I know better. Strength is stayin' when it would be easier to walk away. It's getting up in the morning when the world feels gray. It's rocking a baby at 3 a.m. with tears running down your face and still singing to her soft as you can. I used to believe people always come back. That if you loved someone hard enough, deep enough, pure enough, they'd find their way home to you. But life showed me, sometimes they can't, sometimes they don't. And sometimes they come back with pieces missing you can't ever get back. And that's not their fault. It took me a long time to stop blaming Tommy for disappearing right in front of me. Longer still to stop blaming myself for not bringing him all the way back. But here's what I learned. You can't save someone from what lives inside their bones. And you shouldn't try to erase the parts of them that got lost along the way. You just hold on to what's left and love it gently for what it is. We spend so much time waiting, don't we? Waiting for them to come around, for the right time, the right words, the right kind of love. I spent years on that porch swing, listening for footsteps, hoping for the version of him I married. I thought if I waited long enough, I'd get him back. But I didn't. What I got instead was a lesson. A slow, painful, beautiful lesson about what it means to let go not of a person, but of the picture you painted in your mind. And that kind of freedom, Lord, it don't come easy, but when it does, it's like breathing after being underwater too long. So here's what I'd say to you. You sitting there listening to an old woman talk about her yesterdays. Maybe it's time to stop waiting. Maybe the thing you're hoping will come back ain't coming. Maybe the love you had ain't the love you need now. Maybe the life you planned got rerouted for a reason you won't understand till much later. And maybe, just maybe, that's okay. You can still plant tomatoes. You can still laugh with a neighbor over pie. You can still find joy in a new song, in the way the sheets smell when they've been dried in the sun. You can start again. Not like before. Not with the same heart, but with the heart you've earned. The one that knows sorrow and still opens. The one that loved and lost and kept on beating. That's what time taught me. Not how to forget, but how to live anyway. Well, that's the story. Or at least the pieces of it I could carry out into the light. Some parts one reckon I'll always keep folded up in the corners of my memory, like one of Tommy's old handkerchiefs, soft with time, full of quiet. But this part I wanted to share. Maybe because it never really was just mine. Maybe because stories once told become a little lighter to hold. I sit out on this porch most evenings now, tea in hand. Same swing, same creek, same view of the trees we planted our first spring here. The world's quieter now. Or maybe I just got better at listening. The birds, the breeze, the hush between things they say more than people ever do. And sometimes, if the light's just right and the wind moves gentle through the cornfields, I can feel it. The swing shifts just a little beside me, as if someone's sitting there. As if Tommy, not the broken man, not the ghost, but the boy I danced with, stopped by just for a spell. Just to remind me that love, real love, don't vanish. It just changes shape. I wonder, sometimes, what you're carrying. You sitting there listening to an old woman talk like her life was a movie reel. Maybe you've got someone you're still waiting on. Or someone you had to let go. Or maybe you're like I was, holding on to what should have been, afraid to step into what is. Can I ask you something? Do you believe love's supposed to come back? I used to think it had to. That if it didn't return the way it left, it wasn't real. But now I think, maybe love's job ain't to return, but to root. To leave something behind. a softness, a lesson, a reason to keep going even after the music stops. You see, this story, it ain't just about war, or marriage, or loss. It's about time, and how it teaches you not to chase what's gone, but to cherish what's still here. A daughter's laugh, a garden in bloom, the sound of rain on the roof, your own breath in the morning. Life doesn't promise us full circles. Sometimes all we get are spirals, wider and wider, carrying us away from what we knew and into what we never imagined. And if we're lucky, we learn to find beauty even in that. I'm not here to tell you what to do. Lord knows I've made my share of wrong turns. But if you take anything from this old heart of mine, let it be this. You don't have to keep waiting. You can love someone and still let go. You can miss someone and still move forward. You can lose and still live. And maybe, just maybe, there's someone out there who's been sitting beside you this whole time, waiting for you to turn your head and say, I'm still here. So tonight, when the stars come out and the porch lights glow soft and golden, take a moment. Sit still. Listen. And if the swing beside you moves, even just a little, well, who's to say it ain't someone you loved? Just saying hello.